So it's just a minute past 4. We'll kick off then. Folks, can I just welcome you all? My name is Ian Dodson. I'm the CEO of AI Certified. You're very welcome to the first of 3 webinars which we'll be running on the EU AI Act enforcement. And starting today, focusing on how enforcement beginning on 2nd of August and what the AI Act actually means for your business, and more importantly, a solution in terms of how you can get ready for it and be fully prepared. What I want to do is we'll do a 3-hander. It'll be myself, Ray Grafton, also from AI Certified, and Alan Thornton, who I would best describe as our navigator, our AI Act navigator, who's going to lead us through the shoals and the sands to safe, deep water when it comes to the AI Act. Alan will deliver the brunt of the presentation, and then all 3 of us will dip in and out at various points in time. Your questions are welcome. Jump in if it's crucial, or we'll give plenty of time at the end as well to actually go over it. So what I want to do is I want to start first of all just by putting this, just giving 90 seconds of context. Anybody who knows me knows that once I have the talking stick, I'm slow to relinquish it, but I have been told that I will be cut off after 90 seconds if I haven't made my point. Amy is wielding the gavel and the red button. So let me just put this in context for everybody, first of all, because I just want to just jump up to 60,000 feet for a minute, just so that we all understand where we're at and why we're here and why this all is happening. So I suppose the best thing I can say is that there's a pattern basically that has held true probably since the Industrial Revolution. And that is that every transformative technology arrives before the rules that govern it. And it's just a fact of how we innovate and how we advance in society, in science, and in technology. The technology arrives, it changes our world, it turns everything upside down, and only afterwards does society then build the guardrails around it. Seatbelts, for example, were not in the first cars that emerged off of Henry Ford's production line back 100 and something years ago. They came afterwards, they came later, and they came once we understood what was at stake and what was at risk and what the danger was. And it's these rules then that let us and allow us and encourage us to adopt and trust a technology enough to let it into our home, or let it into our lives, or let it into our businesses. And it's no different here with AI or with the internet. Regulation really is the price of adoption. And it's this regulation that turns a powerful and some would say a slightly frightening new technology into something that a company or a business or a customer or an insurer is willing to stand behind. So why this regulation? Why now? And why Europe, basically? And it's quite simple, really. Europe and the European Union have spent the past decade quietly writing the world's digital rulebook. It all started with GDPR, and GDPR really was the moment where it became clear and apparent to everyone that if you wanted to operate in Europe, you wanted to operate and do business here, you had to play by these rules. And much of the world has now copied our GDPR regulation in one form or another. And the EU AI Act is very much the next chapter in that same story. So it's the first comprehensive law for artificial intelligence, and it's deliberately both risk-based and phased. So it doesn't try to do everything at once, and that's really the key to understanding today. What's landing now is phase 1. It doesn't start with paperwork. It doesn't start with box ticks. It starts with people. It starts with the literacy and with making sure that the human beings that are using these AI systems actually understand them. And that's what Article 4, by the way, asks for, without trying to steal or preempt what Alan is going to be saying, and it's live now. But make no mistake, by the way, that this is definitely the beginning. It's not the end. Coming down the tracks, there'll be further obligations on high-risk systems. There'll be general purpose model rules. There'll be different things like that. And just like with GDPR, we can expect the rest of the world to follow us. So this isn't a box that you tick once and forget. It's very much going to be a new kind of a permanent operating environment for anyone that's using AI, and it will definitely keep evolving. The good news is that getting ahead of it doesn't have to be really laborious or heavy or slow or expensive. done right, it can actually become a competitive advantage and a real signal of trust that you can put in front of your customers and in front of the marketplace to say that you are compliant with the EU AI Act. And that's really what we want to show you over the next 45 minutes. So what I want to do now then is hand over to Alan, who is going to take you through the agenda and the brunt of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ian, and welcome to everyone in attendance. I've been really looking forward to this enforcement series as the August 2nd deadline approaches, and big thanks to AI Certified for hosting it. So what we'll cover today, first we will look at the EU AI Act, who's in scope and what's at stake. We'll take a brief look at the relevant articles and mandates. Secondly, then we will look at meeting the training duty, role-based accredited AI literacy. Third will be documentation and evidence, what regulators expect you to keep. Then we'll take a look at being audit ready and independent assurance, making it count. And we'll have plenty of time, as Ian mentioned, for a Q&A piece. So get your questions into the chat. We will read them out at the end, and we may even have time to take questions directly from people. Fantastic. So jumping straight in to the key articles and organization mandates, as Ian mentioned in his intro, the European Union has been kind of leading the way from a digital regulation perspective for the last 10 plus years. And the EU AI Act itself actually passed into law in August 2024. So it's been around for a while, but the digital omnibus has just cemented the articles and the enforcement piece as of June 30th this year. So what was passed into law took 2 years essentially to tweak. And as of June 30th, we now have a clear understanding of what the landscape looks like for organizations as the very first enforcement deadline approaches in 17 days on August 2nd. So the EU AI Act has 144 articles and a lot of annexes to go with them. But key to organizations understanding what they need to do are these articles you see here in front of you. So Article 4 and 5 focus on literacy and prohibited practices. Article 4 is really the foundation and corner piece to your entire AI governance framework and strategy within your organization. So every organization deploying AI must ensure staff understand the tools sufficiently for their role. Training must be documented, so a casual team meeting or quarterly updates will not be legally compliant. You need to actually have documentation in place around training. Article 5 then focuses on prohibited practices. Certain use cases are entirely banned as of February 2025 within the European Union. The most common overlooked violation is workplace emotion recognition in productivity tracking or interview platforms. So people have been trying to clean up their systems if they have any use case that falls under the prohibited practice piece, because as we'll see later, the fine is severe. Articles 6 through 26 then focus on high-risk frameworks. So risk levels and system classification is Article 6. Systems in HR, credit scoring, health, essential services require active verification. Intended use and marketing claims dictate risk classification level. So there are 4 levels when it comes to risk categorization: minimal risk, limited risk, which is general purpose AI, your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, high risk, which we've just mentioned, and then prohibited practices are the top level. We can take a look then at Article 26, which is deployer mandates. This is really important to understand. Compliance cannot be fully delegated to vendors. So it's important to understand the tools you're using, the vendors you work with, and the partnerships that you have, and how your supply chain and vendor chain are operating. Because deployers must actively implement human oversight, continuously monitor operations, and maintain tamper-evident logs. So not only what you're doing is important, you need to understand what your partners and vendors and suppliers are potentially doing as well. Then what's really critical on the far right-hand side is Article 50 and 99. 50 is related to August 2nd's deadline. So the enforcement piece is specifically focused on Article 50 and GPIA, general purpose artificial intelligence transparency requirements. So clear disclosures around chatbots, synthetic media, biometric categorization systems, and things like this all fall under the Article 50 requirements. So again, most businesses are using a ChatGPT, a Claude, or a Gemini in some way. Most people may be using those tools to deliver a product or a service to somebody else in their supply chain. So it's very, very important from August 2nd that you have your literacy piece in place and your governance framework set up. So Article 99 then, really, really key, and what I'm most asked about is penalties. So there's severe financial exposure starting on August 2nd. So the bottom orange fines we see there are 3% of global annual turnover, or 15 million for systemic transparency or governance failures from August 2nd. And then from December 2027, we'll take a look at this in more detail a bit later on, the max level fine becomes 35 million euros, or 7% of annual turnover, which is quite severe. So how the EU AI Act applies to your business today. As we've mentioned, this has been in the works for 2 years. It is an active piece of legislation. It applies to businesses in some cases already today, and then from August 2nd, it becomes more of an emergent major risk piece inside of your business. So you don't need to be a multinational to be in scope if your team uses AI. Article 4's AI literacy obligation, already applies to you, and your customers and partners are starting to ask. So now in force, Article 4 has applied since February 2025. So that literacy training piece as part of the EU AI Act for organizations has been live since 2025, the same time as prohibited use cases were banned. It is not pending. So literacy is the foundation for your entire AI strategy, not a box ticking exercise, as Ian alluded to in the intro. The enforcement for transparency and Article 4 best efforts practices is August 2nd, 2026, 17 days from now. National supervision and penalties begin. The grace period is over. So in Ireland, for example, there are 15 named bodies who look after enforcement and regulation that feed into the National AI Office, the Department of Enterprise. And for example, the central bank will look after finance and insurance related AI. Comreg will look after marketing and advertising and sales related AI, for example. The primary AI office in the European Union has been fully staffed now. As of 2 months ago, they put 60 members on their team to start overseeing enforcement, and they have a mandate to begin audits in Q3 2026. So we have that transparency related Article 50 deadline coming on August 2nd, and we have a team in the European Union ready to start doing audits within the first quarter after that goes live. So everybody is in scope. Any organization deploying or using AI, from a one-person business to a large enterprise. It's more about use cases than it is about the size of your business. So what is at stake? Why has this got the board's attention now? As we mentioned, from August 2nd, we have that top level 15 million euro fine, or 3% of GAT, for GPAI, general purpose AI, and transparency related breaches. And then from December 2027, Annex 3 high risk breaches go to 35 million, or 7% of turnover. So what changes in 17 days time? As we mentioned, national authorities begin active supervision. Over the last 12 months, national authorities have actually been working together across the European Union to do faux audits with people, especially in the Netherlands, France, Germany. So they started showing up last year to businesses asking, if we came for an AI audit, would you be able to provide a framework and the relevant documentation to really kind of start getting the juices flowing for people and to understand how their own enforcement practices will work going forward. So the Article 50 penalties go live. Really, really important. That is no joke. That is happening from August 2nd. There is a kind of hidden fine that is lesser known or spoken about, which is for EU public bodies, and it's capped at 750,000 euros for Article 50 breaches from August 2nd. So that would include in Ireland, for example, the Gardaí, Síochána, the Education and Training Boards, the Department of Social Protection, bodies like this, public universities would fall under that as well. So not only do businesses and enterprises need to have their literacy piece and foundation in place alongside their governance framework, so do public bodies. Really, really important. It essentially touches anybody using AI. There are very, very little exemptions. So customers, partners, and procurement teams are already asking for evidence on your AI literacy measures. And really, really key is insurance. So this is starting to become a major risk zone. Is your policy covering AI incidents, or are you even covered anymore as policies begin to void if you do not have a verifiable AI framework in place? It's an interesting
Alan,
concept.
if I could just come in there, because I just to share with everybody from the customers that I'm speaking to, mainly around England, Ireland, and around Europe, particularly around Germany. Some of the feedback that I'm getting, when it comes to the procurement side of it, like before a regulator ever calls, your customers will, right? So the conversations I've already had with procurement teams, they're already asking for evidence of AI literacy measures in security reviews. So I'm not sure if anybody else has come across that, but certainly I have. And on the insurance side, that's definitely a topic that's come, when I've spoken to some CTOs, this is an emerging risk. So, policies are beginning to void or exclude AI incidents where there's no verifiable AI framework in place. So check the renewal wording and make sure that you're covered. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Fantastic. And we will take a look at the 5 questions that you can't avoid. Ray, you may like to speak on this.
Yeah. So when it comes to, your customers, B2B and B2C, um, what I'm seeing is that, like, how are you governing AI? That has to be a verifiable answer for every customer conversation, right? More so when it comes to individual people, it's how is my AI involved with my data? Yeah. Um, on the boardroom level, it's very much coming down to assurance, being assurance ready for the next risk review. So can we prove we're managing AI risk? Yeah. And I think when it comes to the regulators, it's really making sure you have everything that we're talking about today in place. That's from your training to your policies, and to make sure that you're submitting the right documents at the right time, and you have all of those records. All of the legacy trail of evidence has to be there. So hopefully we're going to show you how we can easily provide a solution for this later on. But also the procurement side, as we mentioned, can we trust your AI processes? And that's a trust page that really shortens security reviews. And particularly anybody who's customer facing in sales teams, etc., customer success teams, this is going to come up. And then finally, your people, what training have we received? One independent answer to all five. Um, and that's what we're going to talk to you about, is a kind of a public certification, a governance score, and an evidence, I suppose an evidence locker that anyone can verify. Yeah. So the solution that we're offering, it's quite simple, guys. We're going to give you the ability to certify your staff. So that's the training piece. We're going to give you then the compliance software, which is going to be bringing you through a lightweight platform. And then we're going to bring you through to the consultative piece with Alan, which is kind of the assurance piece, right? So that independent Q&A. And what that means in a little bit more detail from the certification side, we want to guide you on define, naming what team members actually have to do this training. And it should be a defined share of your team across key elements of your business. And we'll bring them through the role-based literacy Article 4 training, the requirement from within Article 4. So, there'll be no stone left unturned. You're just going to learn what you need to be able to be compliant. Um, Secondly, the second solution is that it's a lightweight platform we've built with Alan Thornton, and it's his platform really. So it's a tamper evident logging system. So this is going to make your lives a lot easier, because we'll be able to give you all of the key pieces that you need to file, and it'll be in one easy to use and one easy to maintain platform. So this is just going to make your life a lot easier and take away all the confusion. What articles do we need to hit, and what's critical, and what are the deadlines? It's all in there for you to make it, really as automated as possible. And then the final piece is where we bring in Alan's expertise around compliance. And this is getting you kind of audit ready. So it's a structured review. It verifies your measures that are genuine. And this step makes, the badge that we can offer you for being AI certified means something. Yeah. So that's the kind of professional audit expertise in there. So what we're going to offer you within I suppose, the three pillars, as you can see here, it's one annual fee and everything is included. So you can really self-assess yourself, or you can take the verified option in the middle, or you can take the audited option, right? You can see the organization size here, how we've broken it down. So it's going to be relevant for every size business, from SMB to a mid-size to a large size business, right up to your enterprise level. And self-assessed basically means it's a verified self-declaration with desk review, and that's your fastest way in. Most popular, the people that companies that we've spoken to already about this, it's the verified option. And this adds an evidence review layer and in an interview and a record sampling. And again, that's probably the most chosen option. Or we can go for the audit ready option, which would be, as you can see on screen, really led by Alan. And that's kind of a chain of custody documentation, cryptographic integrity attention, and then the technical documentation template. So I think really what you're going to get from the offering here is an entry point and an exit point to manage this, and really a very cost-effective solution, considering some of the customers I've spoken to have been hit with illegal quotes from certain larger firms, anything from 20,000 right into the hundreds of thousands. And I think, Alan, you could probably put a bit more color on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's not only the enterprise clients that get the large bills. I've also come across in the last year startups who may have proprietary AI systems. One paid $350,000 to get what this offers put in place for his business, and he was very upset to find me after the fact that
Gotcha.
he could have done something like this. It would have worked for him as well.
Yeah. So just to sum it up before we move to the next slide, every package is annual and all inclusive. The certified qualification seats is what you get. You get the evidence tracking platform, you get the QA review, and ultimately, if you certify a certain amount of people and go through the training and the QA, you get a badge. Okay. And that's a big retention tool to any business. It's also, customers love saying that you're, following the compliance of the EOA Act at the procurement conversations, especially as we've seen. And then the two things that will move the price really is your organization size. So how many people must be certified and your chosen level of audit readiness. Renewals will be charged at a reduced rate, right? So obviously you need to maintain this. But we're happy to have a call with your meeting about that. Go ahead, Alan.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So, Ray, thank you for outlining the available options to everybody. And now we will take a brief run through of the three-step solution that we have, starting from literacy to becoming audit ready. So step one is related to Article 4. That literacy piece requires everyone who works with AI on your behalf has a sufficient level of AI literacy training in place appropriate to their role that is evidenced. So we have two examples here, and I'll add a third one before we move to the next slide. Imagine you have a HR team or a HR tool in place for screening candidates' CVs or processing individuals' private or personal data and potentially making decisions based on that information. Those individuals within the company or the management team who oversee HR need to have deep compliance training in place, strict data privacy control understanding, and bias awareness there, because this would be what's classed as a high-risk system, and it touches people's information and potentially can make decisions around real human beings. The next example then is a receptionist in your business, maybe using ChatGPT or Gemini or any other sort of GPAI tool, to draft email welcomes, to put together basic content for your LinkedIn page, whatever it may be. This individual within the business needs a basic kind of security awareness level of training. They need to understand what the EU AI Act is, what bias control is, and that's essentially it. So they kind of know what happens with AI at a basic level and how the EU AI Act rules apply to their use case. So in these two examples we see on the left, the HR team is a high-risk use case, touches people's private data. There's a more intensive training piece required versus the receptionist, who has a lower level training requirement. And AI Certified can look after all of this for your different team members, which is fantastic. The third example, which is not listed here, is leadership teams. So the Article 4 literacy piece essentially mentions that leadership teams need to have a training or literacy level to understand AI deployments within their organization. So that covers everything. That can be the receptionists using their ChatGPT, to the HR team using their tool, to a proprietary tool or system that has been developed inside of the business to maybe make business decisions, or maybe it's a proprietary tool that you're selling to the public. So the leadership team need to have a level of training to understand AI deployments across the available use cases and organizations. So it's really important to understand that. That's probably the most intensive requirement for training in an organization. So scale literacy to the role is the point I'm trying to make. The duty scales with how your people use, oversee, or deploy AI, and it works both ways. So training without a governance framework or a framework without training leaves a massive gap. So together they form a solid foundation for confidence in AI governance. And then how do we translate the duty? So 100% of your AI engaged staff complete a baseline AI literacy model. So that gets everybody to a certain point. Your receptionist will be covered to a point, your HR member and your leadership team will be covered to a point, for example. And then obviously additional training options are available depending on how you need to scale that. Key roles, we can train those individuals, named users, overseers, and deployers earn an accredited qualification through AI Certified, which is SQA recognized. And then log, make sure your log is in place. We'll talk on the next slide about tamper evident logs and what that actually means. And that needs to record everything in relation to training, documentation, systems, use cases, policy, and so on. So step 2, we've got your training in place, your literacy, you understand what you need to do and how it applies to the EU AI Act so that you are compliant. Step 2 is around making sure that your logs are tamper evident. So what does that mean and what needs to be covered? So training records, as I mentioned, who completed what training, when, per person, per role. Role mapping, who uses, oversees, or deploys the various types of AIs within your organization. Policy acknowledgements, who manages, sign off, renewal dates, version history. The Act itself, from a human oversight perspective, requires a quarterly review to be completed. So you'll need to bake that into what you're doing. Make sure you're reviewing systems every quarter or every time there is potentially a major use case change within your organization. And then you need to make sure that how you've put all that together is renewal ready and can be exported to various people who ask. So it could be a procurement team, it could be an insurer, it could be the EU AI's office directly if a complaint is made against you or they randomly pick you to be audited. You need to be able to produce that evidence to the standards required under the EU AI Act. So the lightweight platform Ray alluded to is included in this offering. So every record is kept in a tamper evident log, and that covers Article 12. Article 12. So no spreadsheets, no consulting projects, documentation regulators expect. So this is not a standard IT log. That will not suffice. It is a record that cannot be altered after the fact without detection. So think of it as like a regulatory black box, so to speak. An SHA 256 hash encryption is a really good example of a tamper evident style log, and that is what is included in the lightweight software package. It's essentially the next core piece on top of the literacy foundation to help you build out that really, really solid governance and compliance framework piece for your organization. Step 3 then is that independent QA, so framework-wide verification. The independent QA phase ensures your entire governance framework is completely accounted for, properly structured, and fully operationalized. A guided structured review with myself will be conducted directly through the software, systematically checking every required measure and regulatory control. Now, again, this is lightweight. I will come in and do the work. It's not time intensive. It's not resource intensive for the organization or the client. So it's a hands-on validation bridge guarantees that your theoretical policies perfectly align with the real-world technical execution, ensuring the final compliance badge carries genuine verifiable weight. So it's really, really important when people see that AI certified accredited badge, that this is what's behind it, and you understand that you're really covered from a technical perspective against the Act for all use cases. So briefly, I don't want to go into too much detail from a time perspective, but the technical assurance component, as briefly mentioned in the audit ready piece by Ray, looks at your complete audit trail, that cryptographic verification piece at every step of the process. Those temper evident hash chains, they're mathematically validated, ensuring historical records and logs cannot be altered retrospectively. Really, really important. The chain of custody documentation piece, the software offers that end-to-end lineage mapping for all data sets, model inputs, and organizational improvements if necessary for your use case. You've got the cryptographic integrity attestation. Apologies, I always pronounce that poorly. So it's signed digital proof certifying that your framework meets the Article 14 human oversight requirement. So this is where your named users are trained. That documentation has been put on the audit log and properly tracked and overseen and is being reviewed correctly. I'll step in and make sure that all of this is in place for you and you've got it set up right. And then that technical documentation template piece, which is really good when people request information on your setup. So the tool will auto-generate audit-ready documents and AI transparency cards to the EU AI Act standards, designed to be human and machine readable. So they need to be able to be understood by a human, so PDF, docx, whatever it may be, and they also need to be machine readable, so a computer can read it HTML or JSON. So the software will be able to do that for you as well. Brilliant. So we are essentially looking at 3 levels of assurance, prove as much as you need. Ray may like to come in on this, but as he mentioned, that self-assessed, verified self-declaration with desk review is the fastest way in. The most chosen option from the middle column you saw is verified, adds evidence review and interview record sampling, and then that audit ready piece, independent prep and control testing that is aligned to the ISO and IEC 42001 standard. So never self-declare alone. This package gets your foundation in place from a training and literacy perspective, gets you that software components so that you can stand over your policies and your governance framework and that you're making really good decisions within that. So Ray, would you like to add anything?
No, that sums it up nicely, Alan. I think we'll leave some time for the Q&A. Yep, that sounds good.
Fantastic. Excellent. So I will hand it over to Ian to speak about the badge.
Just take yourself off mute. There you go.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys, for that. That was comprehensive, and there's a lot of information in there. So I know we're going to circulate the slides afterwards, and we'll do a quick Q&A. Let me do what I do, which is jump back up to 60,000 feet for 2 seconds, just to bring this home, just before we jump into the questions. Okay. So I have been lucky over the past 15 years to be involved in now the second successful export out of Ireland of a certification standard. I was a co-founder with Anthony Quigley of the Digital Marketing Institute back around 2008. And I'm extremely proud of the fact that it's been one of Ireland's most successful exports in terms of a certification standard, and probably about 130,000 certified practitioners around the globe. The American Marketing Association uses the DMI standard as their international standard for recognizing skills in marketing when it comes to the field of digital. So Ireland definitely punches above its weight in terms of our ability to export meaningful education, certification, and regulation standards. Go back to the ECDL. European computer driver license. I see Gary Clear on the call here, who was also involved in that back in the 90s. That was an initiative driven out of Ireland as well. My point is that our role in AI Certified is to encourage the AI industry to grow up, to stop being the wild, hair on fire, burn everything down, teenager in the room, disrupting everything and causing chaos. For any new technology to be properly adopted, safely used, and meaningfully applied in our businesses, we have to have regulation. We have to have clear accreditation, certification, and regulation in place around it to support it, so that all stakeholders can comfortably engage with a technology like this and be able to use it. And the EU AI Act is real and it is live. And the fines on this one are deliberately scarier than GDPR ever was. And I certainly don't want to be the cautionary tale when they decide to, let's now make an example of somebody and bring them to court, and suddenly that's going to wake everybody up. I don't want to wait until that point. The great thing about the EU AI Act is that the opening obligation is not a box tick. It's not some document you have to whatever. It actually focuses on people. And this is why we are massively supportive of it within AI Certified, because it focuses on people and it's human in its focus, and it focuses on literacy. In other words, how will people be able to properly, safely, and securely use AI in my business? And that's the starting point. Education is the silver bullet. Knowledge is power. And that's really where the EU AI Act begins its journey. And what we're basically encouraging people to do is don't just stop there. Grab hold of the education part, grab hold of the training and the literacy that's required. Add to that a light touch software platform that keeps all your training and your documentation in place and properly accounted for and properly auditable. And then add a quality assurance review on top of that to make sure that all of your measures are genuine, and it makes then the badge mean something. And what we mean by the badge is the AI Certified enterprise badge, which once people walk through this 3-phase and this 3-step solution, this is the badge that they receive. And this badge will start to have more and more meaning. And every day, companies are talking to us about, we got asked by X, we got asked by Y, we got asked by Z. What's our policy on this? What's our framework for that? This is a new mode of operating, and we have to be prepared to actually engage with it and grab hold of it. And it is by having properly defined education, certification, and regulation in place, and a proper badge that says, now I've got that, that's what's going to start differentiating ourselves with our customers as well. So if you just want to jump onto the last slide there, Alan. The badge carries weight for everyone, and it is going to both be an internal and an external validation and proof that your organization takes AI seriously, takes the opportunities of AI seriously, and takes the threats of AI seriously. The great thing about this is that it is coming at a time, we're not waiting. I think if I could criticize GDPR and the EU's approach to regulation on one thing, it just took too long to come through. We had 10, 15 years of destruction in social media and in data before we really got a grasp on it. The great thing about this is AI is only really beginning to explode now, and the act is already in place. And that's the thing that really gives me great comfort in that sense. It's not finished, it's not complete, it is open-ended, and it will grow further. And we hope to continue to bring meaningful solutions to the marketplace that help companies to make sense of AI, adopt AI, and make sure they're compliant with AI as we move forward. So that's it in a nutshell. So I'm happy to throw the floor open to any of us, myself, Ray, or Alan. Or if anyone any thoughts or comments, please do feel free to jump in. Any cautionary tales, anecdotes, stories, jokes will all be accepted.
I think we have a couple of questions in the chats. We might start there.
Great, super stuff.
So William was asking, for being, I suppose, a sole trader, does our professional diploma cover the training of the EUA Act and the governance? So yes, it does, Willie. It's covered in Module 9 in the AI governance and ethics as well as in all 10 modules, to be very honest, because governance and security and risk is so critical to how we adopt AI. So it's right across everything from prompt engineering to context engineering to agentic AI, etc. It's all in there, right up to the data, how the use of data and the use, the strategic modules. So yeah, it's well covered in the existing diploma. And if you're doing that, I think, Willie, at the moment, it's probably at the end of the course, so you might have got through it yet. So yeah, in terms of the other question, I think, Keith, you were asking, this is quite a specific one. In the case of health tech apps, who has to do the active verification and how does this work in practice? I have a quick thought on this, and then I'll hand it over to the expert in the room because I have come across this with another customer. So it's a good question. Alan, you keep me honest. You're the expert, but I think the answer splits depending on whether the health tech app qualifies as a medical device. All right. Because we're again, think of the high risk the categories. So if the app is an AI embedded medical device, um, you know, the verification is genuinely a third party for that one. And the trigger for high risk classification under the AI Act is that the device must be subject to third party conformity assessment by a notified body designated under MDR or IVDR. So that's my knowledge on that one. If you have anything to add to that, Al?
Yes. So when it comes to systems like this, the EU AI Act compliance piece and who's responsible for what really comes down to those kind of two avenues you mentioned. Because behind every AI system is somebody who develops it and somebody who deploys it. So when you are a developer of a proprietary AI tool, or if you are wrapping up a GPAI, and providing it into a medical device or as a medical service in that space. The people who are developing that use case, as Ray mentioned, they're automatically going to be classified as a high risk Annex 3 system, and they will have to complete by law under the Act that conformity assessment. That conformity assessment is a 12-stage process that can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months to complete. And when that process has been completed, that software, that piece of AI software, will then get a CE mark and be entered into the EU's database for high risk systems. So once that happens, the tool is able to, it's basically granted market access at that point. And when it comes then to a user of that tool, let's say a business has bought this AI system or device or whatever it may be for medical uses. A GP might have it, they might be using it differently to a dentist, for example, or whatever the use case may be. How they deploy that then is on them. As we noted at the start of today's conversation, it's about developers and deployers, and it's not just the vendor has passed the conformity assessment, they have the CE mark, they're in the database, we're good to just deploy this anywhere we want, and happy days. You have to have your literacy training in place so that people understand how to use this system that you have and how it's being deployed to the public through your organization. And then you need to have that tamper evident logging piece in place. How is the tool being used? We have our documentation. We're running quarterly reviews on the developer to understand, is this AI changing? How is it changing? Are we logging that a change has been made? So really both. There's a conformity assessment piece available, or required for the people who make the AI, the people who build it, make it, wrap it up, whatever it may be, if it's going to be a high risk use case. And then the deployers of that downstream, the B2B clients, whatever it may be, they have their own requirements under Article 50 transparency to get that verification for their use case in place. So it can be quite detailed, nuanced, tiny bit of gray area. So if you need any more information on that, obviously book a demo here with myself and Ray, and we'll be able to talk through that in more detail.
Thanks actually for that. I regret to say I don't have a health tech ready to go to the market. I'd actually spoken to a couple of people. I heard one on a podcast and spoken to somebody else. And as you were talking about the requirements there, the question just popped up in my mind and I asked it. So thanks for that clarification.
No problem. Cheers, Keith.
Gotcha. Yeah. And of course, look, if it's just like a wellness app, right, that's not classed as high risk. Okay. So that's a different story. Yeah. In terms of that piece. We've another question here from Lisa Tucker. So is there anything that can be learned from pseudo audits that were completed? Did they release any information on them? Secondly, do you have a sense of what businesses they might target first? Pseudo
Yes, no
audits.
problem. Yeah, so they did not release any information on pseudo audits, which is, fantastic for the rest of us. They essentially used it as a testing ground to understand how they were going to manage the audit process from the kind of top office through the member states, nominated offices, and then all the kind of branches of named bodies who look after enforcement. So essentially, it operated in the background as like a training space for the enforcement agencies and officers going forward. So everybody is in scope to be audited. There is no, we're going for big enterprises first, we're going for SMEs first, we're going for startups first. Because there are so many named bodies and you've got different sections of institutions and governments looking at every aspect of AI use across their country, even in public bodies, as we mentioned, the Garda Síochána, the Department of Social Protection, nobody is exempt from this. And they are looking to do a broad stroke to audits in Q3. So I would expect, for example, maybe accelerators to be approached to start doing audits with smaller startups who are building out AI tools, because that's like the primary driver of most accelerators across Europe at the moment. They will then obviously go to the SMB, the SME, larger enterprises. So for example, Microsoft or Google, they are not exempt, but they are kind of viewed in a different way to the rest of us. So they sign and partake in what's called a code of conduct and practice. The only company who hasn't signed that, just for your own knowledge, is Meta. All other major AI providers of GPA AIs have signed it. So there's an understanding between all of those deployers at the very, very top level and developers with the EU that they are meeting the kind of the top line data control, privacy control, all of those types of things, how data is managed within their tools. So you may then have a smaller business, like an accountancy firm, I say smaller, that could be a 2,000 or 3,000 employee business, but they have equal potential to be audited as the startup who's developing software for self-driving cars. There's no, we're targeting one group first.
Excellent. So Lisa, does that help? You're still with us?
Yes, absolutely. That helps. It's unfortunate we didn't get any lessons learned or anything like that from those audits. It would have been a good starting point. But hopefully soon we'll get some sort of guidance.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't come sooner. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Miko's question. Miko is asking, can we maybe just summarize and clarify again? So firstly, what compliance is required today, right now, by the EU AI Act?
Yep, no problem. So what's required today is that Article 4 literacy training for anybody who is a named user, overseer, or in the leadership team within your organization, so that you have that literacy and training piece in place. That's a requirement right now and acts as the foundation for everything else. From 17 days' time will be the tamper evident logging piece and being able to produce your evidence and documentation. Now, what's really, really interesting, I didn't mention it earlier, but now is probably a good time to mention it, is that in some cases, they haven't stepped back from this yet, but they mentioned that because the Act has essentially been around since 2024 and different phases of it have come online at different times, The deadline of August 2nd is when the enforcement penalties kick in. It's not when everybody should say, "Oh, I need to start today," and where we're good, starting August 2nd. They expect backdating and at least a best effort to show that you are looking into this or starting to put a framework or a policy in place for what's happening with AI in your business. So that's one thing, is you'll need to have that tamper evidence log in place, and that history that you can produce to anybody who asks. That's on top of the training. Both of those things need to be happening right now. And then from August 2nd, you need to have your transparency piece in place, which is making sure you understand how Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever it may be, is being used in your organization. And if any of the deliverables or outputs from those systems are seen by the public or are public facing, that you're tracking and deploying labels on that content. So from August 2nd, you need the visual label, which you may have seen on the very first slide. As we opened up today's session, it said parts of today's session have been supported by AI for graphics and text. That's a really good example of a transparency label, and that needs to be logged and assigned to the use case that created it internally. And then obviously you need to have that training in place to understand how to do that. So Article 4 training is required now. Building out your compliance, tamper evident framework and documentation piece is required now. And it's only from August 2nd that the fines come online to penalize you for not having your label in place, not having your log in place, not having your training in place.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And then secondly, in relation to what comes in effect by August 2nd, I think you touched on that, right?
Yeah, I touched on that briefly. So the primary Article 4 piece, like we said, has been there since February 2025, but it will be covered by the enforcement fines coming on August 2nd. But what really the main line item is Article 50 of the Act itself, which covers transparency. And there are 4 parts to it: A, B, C, and D. And essentially it's around chatbots, synthetic media. So that's anybody essentially in marketing or advertising or whatever it may be, creating content and putting it out there. And around biometric kind of scanning, airport systems that may scan biometrics as you pass through, all need to have a full register and use case log in place, mapped against the relevant articles, so that you can produce the proper documentation on the back end for your records and the compliance piece, and understanding how all of that works. So it's Article 4 training, Article 50 transparency regulations around GPAIs. That's really what August 2nd is all about. And then everything comes into scope from December 2027, your high-risk systems. They're more complicated. Things in HR, medtech, they have more time to get organized.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, can I just bring in, there's just one comment here. Sorry, it was just a DM. Where is it? What about the full population of a company, Ray? Maybe you can answer this one. I think all employees should be trained, because the risk of them utilizing AI on an individual level must be managed. The company policy communicated, and the risk and implications of using AI are not. A foundation certificate, for example, for all employees to ensure comprehensive protection for the organization, which is evidence-based and certifies as understood by those undertaking it. So yeah, do you want to talk, Ray, just about just AI literacy in that sense, in the general sense?
Yeah. So I mean, look, it's a really good. It's a really good question, because being AI literate gives you a baseline to build the knowledge, to build a phased approach into adopting AI into certain job functions, certain teams. When I was with Pluralsight and we were training people in AI, probably Gen AI 3 years ago, to probably some big global companies, the gap was always, where do we start? Who takes this? Who takes responsibility And it started off with the leadership going, well, give it to the techies. These guys, get technology. They'll know what to do with this AI. And of course, the techies had to train themselves. All right. They had to get some knowledge around this. So it's a new technology. And what they then made as a recommendation to the leadership, I remember speaking to an insurance company called NN Insurance in the Netherlands, a pretty big global business, about this point. And their challenge was, look, we gave it to the C-suite, and the C-suite went, well, okay, we've taken your recommendations. They realized, oh, we need to do some literacy training, right? And because we don't understand what the recommendations are coming from the tech team. And then after doing that literacy training, then they kind of pushed forward. Mind you, this was 3 years ago. And then they pushed forward and they built out a strategy, and they built out, the kind of the build versus buy, and all of the good strategic stuff that goes into building out a kind of a transformation plan and an infrastructure, a kind of strategy, and what systems need to be replaced, and what people need to be replaced. And they gave it back to the techies to go in to implement. And the tech guys went, well, hang on a second. You're talking about a strategy here which affects the sales department, the marketing department, the finance, basically every department in the business. And what that means is, you really need to speak to the heads of those departments to find out what needs to be changed, or what processes or workflows are going to benefit my team by using AI. And then the heads of those departments realize, well, we need to actually speak to the guys on the ground, the guys in the team. So quite quickly, the enterprise kind of motion of AI transformation changed from a top-down strategy to a bottom-up strategy. And the only way they could actually affect that quickly and effectively was by building the baseline of knowledge through an AI literacy program. And then the phase two would come, where they would build a role mapping exercise, and they would do AI for sales and AI for marketing. And then eventually, if that training wasn't moving the needle, they were looking at some type of customized solution, a certification potentially that was built bespoke for to manage this adoption. Because at the end of the day, it involves people. And this training is such a critical part. That's why we've partnered with Alan, because one complements the other. And the training, so on that point, and I'll leave it with this, is that the training was not being done. When they got to the literacy phase one and they did the role mapping phase two, sometimes in the bigger organizations, it was seen as just another internal training program. So then they had to kind of get the carrot to get people to do the training was, well, you're going to get a certification for life based on your AI for your sales team or for your marketing team. And this is a accredited qualification that you can bring forward for your personal growth and your career, regardless if you stay with the business or not. But that moved the needle, and that had affected the training at scale. And it allowed the company basically to shift and move into adopting AI across the business quickly.
Yeah. And it's very much, by the way, it's very much part of the motivation behind the range of programs that AI Certified has. So we have a professional diploma, which is a 30-hour program across 10 modules. We have a professional certificate in AI application and a professional certificate in AI management. And we have a shorter program then in AI literacy as well, because everyone this is the ECDL of the modern era. I mean, digital literacy now is AI. It used to be Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, then it became Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and now it is AI. And it's something that we're going to be rolling out from September onwards. Is a whole series of role-specific programs: AI for sales, AI for marketing, AI for finance, AI for operations. But right now we have 4, which are literacy entry level, AI certification for application, how to apply it, how to manage it, and then the full professional diploma for how to bring it into your career in a meaningful way. I'm conscious of the time. I think we're 5 o'clock on the
just
dot.
One more question. Sorry, I just before we
sure.
wrap up, Jackie, you put your hand up there. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi guys, thanks a million. Sorry, I missed the start of it. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I think for the SME sector really, guys, that I'm finding is this leadership understanding, even bringing in this literacy I don't know how many SMEs I spoke to recently at events, and they actually weren't aware that this needed to be mandatory. But coming back to your point there about like what you're offering is fantastic. It's a really, really good opportunity for any organization to have that certification. But my question really lies in this raising of awareness and funding and grants for the smaller SMEs. Like I remember bringing in GDPR into the dental sector where I was working, and it was a rush job. It was very stressful. And I remember the day it became law, our first dentist, who was my test case for it, rang looking for all our policies. So is there an equivalent? I think Alan, you heard this already with me on a call, but like is that going to happen to organizations? Are they going to face that situation where someone is going to ring up, or how as you say, the customer is the first one who's going to hear this? But is that also within teams? Are you seeing that within the teams as well? That someone is going to turn around and say, okay, show me well, obviously the badge is a great recognition step. But outside of that, if they can't see a badge, how are they going to know? Your customer's going to ask that question. But even inside your team and for attraction of talent, like if you don't have that baseline as an SME, I think it's a big, big challenge right now for them. So how are you hearing? Is there an echo of that in what you're getting as inquiries, I suppose?
Very much so.
Okay.
And I'm like, we've a number, like in terms of small, medium-sized businesses, where we're talking to at the CEO level, they might have 100 employees, and they're really saying that we need to train everybody, because it depends if you're in the high risk category, Jackie. Like if you're, do you know what I mean? And so are we as an education business.
Yes.
So we've got to get it right, and it's been taken up by, if you're lucky enough to have a compliance officer in the building, they will be leading it. But the senior leaders and the companies that are switched on, because they're high risk, I think the penny's dropping there, and they're all asking us, where do we start with this? And especially if you have any potential use cases to bring AI as a service to your customers, then they're seeing also the revenue benefit forward. So that kind of adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm seeing it like we've a number of proposals out there to train businesses, in their entirety, and we're trying to make it affordable for them to do so, because the real goal is beyond phase one literacy. It's really in the role mapping phase, where you make it bespoke per team. And then you can get down to the exact tools the teams use, and how that fits into an overall AI strategy for the business.
Okay. And taking a company maybe under 20, are you seeing any echoes of that too?
Plenty. Yeah. I'm dealing with a number of kind of startup businesses as well, that need to be able to move quickly, because they're generating so much with AI. And you've got to label all of the marketing facing material, if that's got to be transparent. They also want to use AI to like everybody, like ourselves as a business, we do use a lot of AI tools because it's quick, it saves us time, and it cuts costs. So I'm speaking to probably about 4 or 5 companies that would be on like anywhere from 10 to 15 employees, that are looking to get the literacy piece for everybody. And like we're happy to do that quite cost effectively, because that's the piece that the kind of people will see immediate value. It can be delivered in a workshop in a day as well, if people want that face-to-face human subject matter expert approach. And we also have an excellent online platform where people can do it, if you're remote and you can't make the training in face. So yeah, a
Okay.
couple of ways we can deliver it.
Thanks, guys. That's great.
Ray, oh yeah, please jump in, guys. Who's there?
Yeah, there's two points I just want to make. One on the previous question, which relates to kind of training everybody in an organization, which is what leadership should be considering. What's really important is what's called shadow AI, and there's a huge risk area around shadow AI. So you may have policies in place, you may have a setup in your organization for AI use. Can you guarantee, do you have a policy in place to stop individuals taking information from that business and pumping it into their own ChatGPT account at home, or their own Gemini, or their own Claude, or whatever? because the risk of any sort of breach there is still on the organization, but you may not even know that there's a shadow AI use case with your, proprietary documents or information from inside your business. A lot of people just think I go home, work on my laptop, I pump it into my own chat GPT. I'm saying it too often, I'm getting mixed up. That, I just do a bit of work and I put it together and present it to the leadership team. You've just exposed the entire business without the leadership knowing to a breach of Article 50, with that penalty applying at the top level of 15 million potentially if something was to go wrong. So training everybody is really important, and getting that understanding from the top level all the way down through the organization to the grassroots level, essentially, that shadow AI is really, really serious and not something that should be done by anybody in the organization. And then just, Ray, before you speak, to Jackie's point around awareness. So EU-wide awareness on this topic amongst leadership is at 31%. So 7 out of every 10 business that this applies to doesn't know it even exists, and they're enforcing from August 2nd. So it will be a panic job, and that's just how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Ray, do you want to just talk about the slide that's active there at the moment, if people want to
just to finish, I think we touched on James Colley's question in the chat.
Was it there covered pretty much? It's shadow AI, and it's like Ian had spoken. Everyone had Word, and you could use your own Word at home. It wasn't the end of the world. Using your own ChatGPT to Alan, it's a totally different. But people are not aware, and they need to be.
Exactly.
Indeed. And when it comes to personal use and company rules, like what we did in Pluralsight 3 years ago, we had an AI Bible, a policy user guidelines that were mapped out for everybody in the business. And this would be part of that, you know what I mean? To make people aware of the silly mistakes that you can, and what's allowed and what's not. And that's part of what we would help businesses with the training that we provide,
So I'm going to jump us now to the very last slide. We're 7 minutes over. Ray, do you want to just talk about what people can do next?
Simply, look, if any of this is relevant for you guys and you want to, or you want to book a meeting with Alan and myself, please feel free to book a demo. I think I've put the meeting link in the chat here. And we'll bring you through what the training looks like in terms of the online format, and then bringing you through to the evidence logging platform that Alan has built, and then the final, QA process. If you want his technical expertise to help you with getting audit ready, what that looks like. So happy to meet you all. If you feel you want to ask any questions or just to see what it looks like in terms of the product we're offering.
Fantastic. Right. On that note, folks, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the interaction and the comments and the questions. And our next webinar in this series on Thursday, July 30th, 72 hours to go. Your readiness plan. It's live. The AF Act is now enforced. Feel free to sign up for that if you want to continue the conversation. And with that, we'll bid you a good day. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
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 Thanks so much, all.